Hello, my friend, and welcome to Something for Everybody. My name is Aaron Machbitz. Today is a solo episode of the podcast where I'm discussing suicide. Suicide is a universal tragedy, but we are not talking enough about the rising suicide rates with men. Deaths from suicide represent not only a major and growing public health challenge, they have a devastating impact on tens of thousands of families every year. In 2023, more lives were lost to suicide, which is 49,000, than to car accidents, which is around 43,000. Suicide is the second leading cause of death for those 25 to 34-year-olds, and rates in the United States are one of the highest and rising. Loss of life to suicide is a tragedy literally on every single occasion. And for every single group, no matter what, it's a tragedy and one of the worst things that someone or a family or anyone really can go through. But the focus here on this episode is on men who are at a much higher risk of suicide, is intended to raise awareness and deepen sort of the general understanding of the scale of this problem with the rising suicide rates with men. The male suicide rate in 2023 is roughly 23 deaths per 100,000 compared to roughly 6 deaths per 100,000 for women. That's a 4 times difference. Men consistently represent an outsized share of total suicides. In 1972, they accounted for 71% of suicides, a figure that rose to 80% in 2023. Every stat represents a profound loss for families, friends, and communities far beyond mere numbers. But by analyzing the trends, we do aim to improve the understanding and awareness of male deaths by suicide. And I think the numbers and the stats prove these facts to be true and undisputable. So in recent years, male suicide rates have reached all-time highs. They have not always been increasing this way. There have been ebbs and flows, over the last 50 years. But in 1999, the suicide rate for American men bottomed out roughly at 18 deaths per 100,000. This rate represented a historic low for the last half century, following a consistent decline through the 1990s. It has since climbed to roughly 23 deaths per 100,000, a 27% jump, and something to be alarmed and concerned by. The sheer scale of suicide deaths among men in the United States should be a cause for national alarm, and the reason for this episode. In 2022 alone, 39,000 men died by suicide. If the rates had remained at their 1999 levels, an estimated 123,000 fewer men might have died by suicide over this period. And if men's suicide rates had matched those of women, approximately 574,000 fewer men would have died by suicide since 1999. So those are the important stats that really stand out to me that I think everyone should be aware of as we try to tackle this national public health crisis. And so more details, information, charts, and studies can be found on the website of the American Institute for Boys and Men, which is run by Richard Reeves, who's doing an amazing job for this specific mental health and public health crisis. So the question now remains, what do we do about it? What do we do about it? This is more about what we can do as a society to help men and boys flourish, because we all play a role in preventing suicide. So this is what we can do as a society to look at our young men, our boys, and say, you're struggling. What can we do to try and help you, instead of always just, forcing men to solve all of their own problems on their own by themselves. Now, yes, I encourage personal responsibility. I encourage personal ownership and taking ownership over your life. But this public health crisis is much more than that, and we need societal, cultural changes. So reducing suicide rates, especially among men, as shown by the numbers, is a critical public health issue that requires a multifaceted approach. Men are often at higher risk due to various social, societal, cultural, and psychological factors. So here, potentially, are some strategies to help lower suicide rates for men. I think almost like anything, step number one has got to be awareness. Awareness. I think making the public aware that suicide among men is actually a serious problem is step number one, because lots of people want to demonize men and blame men for all the problems ever and don't even want to accept the fact that this is a very real public health crisis. So in this situation, awareness is paramount. That's why the American Institute for Boys and Men is trying to bring awareness to these alarming stats. And we have to come to terms and accept the fact that this is happening, that our young men and our young boys need our help. So we must first come to terms with the fact that men and boys really do need our help. And so part of awareness would be public education campaigns, which at least initiate more conversation about what must be done to help boys and men, at least get people to accept the fact that this is real and we have to do something about it at a societal level. Let me take a quick drink here. And so next step, number two, after we create some awareness and we get some acceptance around this health crisis, we move on to number two, which is potentially improve access to men-specific mental health resources. We must ensure that men have access to mental health resources that are specifically geared towards them, because we can't absolutely and we shouldn't absolutely treat men and women's mental health the exact same. It just doesn't work that way. Men and women are wired differently, biologically, evolutionarily, we're wired differently, and so the way we treat what's going on with our psychological or with our mental is different. Now, there's some approaches that are going to be, tried and true, that are going to work to help our mental health, right? Thinking well, eating well, moving well, and sleeping well. But there are some things that have to be geared specifically towards helping men. It's not a one-size-fits-all cookie cutter approach that just doesn't work for our mental health. We have to think about the individual, and we also have to think about who they are as a person. And so men need that specifically geared towards them. And so you have these targeted outreach programs specifically designed to reach men as they may be less likely to seek help due to whatever may be cultural or societal factors. These could include, workplace programs we could use, community-based mental health initiatives, men groups, or online platforms. All of these are ways that we can specifically reach men. Again, workplace programs, community-based mental health initiatives, men's groups, online platforms, trying to meet men where they are and doing things that they already enjoy doing, and then adding these sort of mental health resources in to help them flourish more and combat these raising suicide rates. And then the next one, number three, we can provide support in high-risk areas, right? Because you have certain work-related factors such as job stress, unemployment, or financial strain are linked to higher suicide rates. So providing specific mental health support in the workplace would definitely help. And getting proactive about the workplace and what we can do about it to create community, to create conversation, to create things that help all people just take care of their well-being a little bit more proactively would definitely help. And then men in high-risk professions, which may include, construction, farming, or emergency services, are at greater risk as well. And so then tailoring even more those programs to fit those sort of workplace needs, maybe offering peer support or providing mental health training to supervisors can potentially help reduce risk. Like just saying, this is a problem, these people are at higher risk in these situations, how can we be proactive about it and get on top of the problem by potentially providing some training or having some groups or doing something together, community-based, or hanging out outside of the office to create better relationships, whatever it is to try and help reduce the risk, reduce the stress, and understand that this is a societal issue, and we need to help our young men and our boys flourish based on some of these practices to help them with their mental health. And so then you have number four after that is promote peer support and social connection. Promote peer support and social connection. So we have to encourage sort of male peer support networks. Basically, we have to encourage relationships. Strong relationships are everything when it comes to taking care of ourselves and living meaningful lives. So sometimes we're just we just don't want to ask for help. We don't want to feel like a burden, or we feel like we can't even ask for help because it would make us look weak. So encouraging male peer support networks, or encouraging strong relationships, or hanging out with friends, or doing stuff together, or joining whatever sort of group or sports community, or going on a hike or a men's community is going to build those relationships. And through effort and through using our body, we're more likely to then open up to someone about, hey, I really need some help here. I'm super stressed here. I'm behind on these bills over here. Maybe how can I help, or how can you help, or I just need to get this off my chest and I know it's going to be okay and I just needed to tell someone. And those sorts of things are important when it comes to creating social connection and creating relationships and creating, these peer support networks, because men are often more willing sometimes to open up to their peers potentially rather than some professionals. That's why men's groups, role models, and communities are so important. That's why it is a societal issue that we can fix and can help participate in changing the stigma around this to help men flourish more. Because men's groups, role models, communities, so important, right? Encouraging the creation of male support groups, whether online or in person, can provide a very powerful space for men to share their struggles, but more importantly, to do physical activities together that lead to open and honest conversations, right? That's really what it's about. Let's go for a hike. Let's camp. Let's play a sports game together. Let's do a hard workout. Then we could sit down, have a coffee, and start to open up and share, because we've already created this sort of connection. That's what support groups are really about. And then you're building bonds with other men who also might be struggling, and now you guys can uplift each other together, right? If you go to Connor Beaton or Man Talks, he does an amazing job at this on his channel with his videos, with all sorts of things. So if you're interested in a video like this, I would recommend going to check out some of his work as well. And then you go to number 5, which is implement early intervention and education. Implement early intervention and education. Mental health education in schools and colleges, right? Teaching mental health literacy from an early age can help young men recognize warning signs of mental distress in themselves and others. This is absolutely crucial. We must get proactive with our mental health. And this goes for pretty much everyone. Yes, this episode is specifically about men, but every single person on the planet can start getting proactive with their mental health. We have all this mental health awareness, and I know I talked about awareness at the top, and that's very important when it comes to these very specific issues, but it has to turn into mental health action. You have to actually do things specifically every day for your mental health so that you are mentally sound, mentally well, and mentally capable, and can handle the challenges and setbacks of life. And so that's why early intervention and education is extremely important. Getting it in early in middle school, high school, and colleges, teaching people the specific mental tools of thinking well, eating well, moving well, sleeping well, why that's important. What's confidence? What's self-esteem? What's how to handle rejection? How do I use my breath? What's my body language like? What's my self-talk? Do I need a visualization, imagery? How do I use my breathing to calm myself down? What are nerves? What's anxiety? How do I handle this thing when it doesn't go my way? What are some things that I can journal about? What are some tools that I can develop? What are all of these sets of skills, actual skills, not just this esoteric sort of invisible mental health thing that I should take care of? What are the actual skills, processes, plans, and daily actions that I can use to proactively every single day take care of my mental health? So again, when the hard thing happens, when the struggle happens, when the setback happens, when the challenge happens, we actually have a set of mental health tools or mental skills to help us combat that and overcome it a little bit more quickly than we would if we were just starting out and being reactive like most of us are when it comes to our mental health, especially here when talking about males and suicide. This is a reactive, process, because all of these men have already lost their lives. All of these men that we talked about in these stats have already lost their lives. So now it's time to put our foot down, to make a stance and actually make some proactive changes about it so we can help the next generation of young boys flourish in this society. And so number 6 would be cultural sensitivity and tailored interventions. So you have to address the cultural factors. Suicide rates among men can vary by cultural or ethnic backgrounds. So tailored interventions that consider cultural norms and values also can help ensure a more effective outreach to diverse populations. So not only do we need to tailor our approach between men and women, but we need to tailor our approach of men in specific cultural or ethnic backgrounds to really serve them exactly where they are and what they might need in those moments. And so again, just admitting, saying, yes, there is a problem, just admitting that there is a problem is powerful, and then aiming to uplift men and not demonize them. That's a huge thing. The narrative around men is also a huge societal and cultural thing that we can change. Not demonizing men, not hating men, not saying the world would be better without men or blaming them for every problem that's ever existed, but trying to uplift them and encourage them. That's an important part, especially for our young men, to see that sort of language of uplifting, encouraging, and saying, yes, you can integrate yourself into a strong masculine man, but not saying all masculinity is toxic and men are shit and we demonize them. That language is good for no one ever. And so this could mean also, potentially, right, collaborating with religious communities or religious leaders to help foster mental health acceptance in communities where really still to this day, we're seeking help for our mental health is seen as taboo or weak, right? It's just continually changing the conversation, updating the conversation to now so that we can help as many people as possible flourish into their best selves while taking care and being proactive with our mental health and potential, life setbacks or challenges or whatever the case may be. And then number 7, of course, we need to use technology and online support. So social media campaigns, specifically that target men on social media platforms, is a good way to reach them where they are, right? Creating content that emphasizes the importance of mental health care, offers resources, and potentially provides stories of hope, can encourage men to take care of themselves or take the necessary steps to take care of themselves or get proactive about their mental health, or join a men's community centered around well-being, or join some sort of community that's about taking care of themselves, right? And because a lot of the stuff, again, on social media is this narrative that men are bad, we should demonize men, there's a lot of misandry, and all these sorts of things. So let's change that. Let's change the narrative, let's change our language, let's use uplifting, encouraging language so that we encourage men to take care of themselves, to become the best versions of themselves, to integrate their masculine so they're healthy and they're strong masculine and they're additives to the world and they want to build things up and be their best selves. And we can use social media as that tool so that we can have them take the necessary steps to be proactive about their mental health, to be the best fathers and husbands and leaders that they can possibly be by joining, men's communities around wellness or fatherhood or healthy masculinity or whatever the case may be. All of these things are possible, but we have to encourage it in an uplifting way, not in a demonizing your shit type of way. So that's that. And then I know I didn't mention much about personal responsibility. I said at the beginning a little bit, and ownership and extreme ownership and personal responsibility. I didn't mention much about that because I think it's important as a society that we accept that our boys and men are struggling and that public action must be taken to help. Of course, it's super important. I emphasize personal responsibility and the power of it all of the time. We have to take ownership and responsibility over our lives. Of course, we absolutely do. We have to take over and control the things that we can control. But that is not enough to save our men. We need collective action from society and, on top of that, personal responsibility. And so I think that's important. Therefore, right, lowering these suicide rates among men requires this multi-pronged approach that involves challenging societal norms, improving access to mental health care, and providing targeted, specific support. It's about creating an environment where men do feel comfortable maybe seeking help or joining a community or talking about what they might be going through so that they can get help for that, or they can talk to a buddy or talk to a friend or go out and do stuff together. Whatever it is, right, where they have access to the resources that they might need and where they're supported by that from their communities. And so encouraging change at the individual, societal, and institutional levels can and will help prevent suicide and save lives, because every single person plays a role in preventing suicide. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your time and attention. If you found that episode valuable at all, please share it with a friend. That's the best marketing tool we have for this podcast, and I think everyone in the world needs to hear this information so we can all be a part of helping our young men and our boys flourish. Thank you. Thank you very much for tuning into that episode. And if you enjoyed it, click right here for another full-length episode of the podcast. And please don't forget to subscribe. But most importantly, above all else, please take good care of yourselves and others. And I'll see you next time. Lots of love. Cheers.